Sajid Javid has been hailed as a new Home Secretary. He's a man who has spoken out about how the Windrush generation have been affected by this hostile environment for legal immigrants, but how it could have affected him and his family as the son of Pakistani migrants. And he feels that this could have happened to him, and he's got therefore an understanding of it. Is Sajid Javid the right man for the job? And what is he going to do differently from Amber Rudd, or indeed her predecessor Theresa May, that's going to reassure people that he, it seems alone, is going to be on top of the Home Office brief?
Well, look, I think it is a good appointment. I was working as Sajid's PPS, Parliamentary Private Secretary, at his old department until yesterday morning. So he was my boss until about 24 hours ago. So I've got to know him quite well. And I think he's one of those quite unusual figures in public life who combines compassion and empathy with a very business-like ability to get things done. And in the months I spent working for Sajid, I saw both sides of him. And I think that will really help him deal with what is a very difficult and challenging brief of the Home Office. I think the fact that he himself comes from an immigrant background, his father arrived from Pakistan in 1961. They lived in poverty. His dad, worked as a bus driver. There were, I think, four kids and plus parents living in one very small flat. And he really worked his way up from nothing to the position that he's in now. So I think he really understands how people who are today in that position feel. He also understands how, if you work hard, you can achieve extraordinary things. And so I think for him, that represents the British dream, and we need to just help as many of our fellow citizens as possible achieve that. Well, so I think that understanding will help him a great deal as he gets to grips with some of the challenges the Home Office obviously has.
That all sounds well and good, Chris. Let me go to Stephen Doughty as a member of the Home Affairs Select Committee. Your committee, to all intents and purposes, led by Yvette Cooper, the former Shadow Home Secretary, actually brought down Amber Rudd. We could say, are all the things that Chris Philp's listed about Sajid Javid's background and his history, are they relevant to actually getting the job done? Because it does appear that the Home Office is still as unwieldy and as unfit for purpose as it was when John Reid said it, goodness knows, more than a decade ago.
Well, I certainly hope they give him some more insight into the reality facing many people who've came and made a huge contribution to this country, but have been caught up in this absolute shambles that is the Windrush scandal. But the reality is he's got to have to be judged by his actions and not by his own story or indeed, warm words that he gives in a statement in the House of Commons. And I was pretty worried yesterday that he wasn't yet, across any of the actual fact and detail, given, as you said.
He'd been in the job about 2 hours by the time he had to make a statement in the House of Commons.
About 7 hours, Julia. But the reality is that he needed to be across some of the absolute basics and still didn't seem to be aware of people being wrongly deported and detained. One of the very issues that, we had been pressing Amber Rudd about so strongly. People like David Lammy, Diane Abbott, Dawn Butler, and so many, have done such a great job in sort of exposing this scandal and the effect that it's had on the Windrush generation. But of course, this goes much, much wider. This is a policy and a set of cuts and changes in the Home Office over the last few years, which has resulted in the net being drawn so widely that British citizens and people who have the full legal right to be here in the UK have been caught up in, an effort to deal with people who are wrong.
Indeed, you brought up Diane Abbott, and I do want to come back to you on that, Stephen. But Chris Philp, just find it briefly because I know you have to go. In terms of what should be in the to-do list, in the in tray for Sajid Javid of what he needs to get done, he said his top priority is tackling the Windrush issue. Now, undoubtedly, it's an absolute outrage what's happened to these people, and clearly an abject failure on all counts of the Home Office. However, what about issues like terrorism? What about the issues of young black men and women being stabbed on the streets of our capital city? What about all the other issues, rising crime we saw this week? Should Windrush generation be the top priority for the Home Secretary?
Well, look, I think dealing with this problem is definitely urgent. These are, as Stephen just said, people who are British citizens. They're as British as you or I, and some of them were badly treated. So fixing that and paying them compensation where appropriate is a top priority, and he's going to do that. The other issues are very important as well. You mentioned knife crime in London. Obviously, Sadiq Khan, the Labour Mayor of London, is responsible for the Metropolitan Police, but we in government need to try and support him to work on or fix the recent rise in knife crime. You mentioned terrorism as well. One thing Sajid Javid did make clear, though, very clear yesterday, is that, there is a huge distinction between people of the Windrush in the Windrush situation who are British citizens and people who are here illegally. And although he doesn't want to use this term hostile environment, which was first coined by a Labour government, he does want to act and will act to combat illegal immigration, meaning, if someone shouldn't be here, it is perfectly reasonable to remove them, and that will continue. We need to be careful to make sure it's the right people, obviously, but that will continue. And it's very telling when Diane Abbott was asked yesterday by Piers Morgan about what Labour's policy on illegal immigration was. She didn't have one. She had no answer to the question, What do you do when people are here illegally?
And a point I wanted to put to Stephen Doughty. Chris Philp, thank you very much indeed, Conservative MP for Croydon South. Used to actually work, obviously, for Sajid Javid. Stephen Doughty, let me come to that, because I said I wanted to come back to this. When Diana was questioned, she didn't seem to have an alternative policy. What should the target be, if at all, for removing illegal migrants from this country?
I think if you get into a debate around very, very specific figures and numbers, you get into the sort of mess that we saw Amber Rudd get into. Because when as in many areas of the public service, if you have sort of artificial targets that are not actually based on reality, you end up making terrible decisions. Look, Julia.
But so you're saying it has to be a realistic target. Now, I think that the target for removing illegal immigrants should be 100%. I don't think anybody who is here illegally should be in this country illegally, and if found, they should be deported. So where between 0% and 100% do you think would be a realistic target?
Well, people who should not be in this country should not be in this country. It's very, very simple.
So you've got a 100% target as well, then?
But here's the issue, Julia, and this is where I'm sorry to say, but the media and others have a huge responsibility in this. What has happened is that we've blurred the issue of those who are here illegally with those who have the full right to be here and British citizens. Let me give you an example.
Stephen, we haven't done that. Some idiots at the Home Office did that, and they should all lose their jobs. But that's not we. That's not you and me. That's not Talk Radio listeners. We haven't done that.
No, Julia, I'm sorry to say, but I've repeatedly seen coverage in certain tabloid newspapers and others that constantly blur the line between people who come here through different routes, entirely rightly so, and those who shouldn't be here. And the reality is that nobody's got a grip on the actual figures. It all gets blurred in that people think that everybody's come here illegally just maybe because of the colour of their skin or because
I don't think they think that at all. Who have you been speaking to who thinks that? There's nothing to suggest that in the polling.
I have spoken to a lot of people who say, "Oh, well, I want illegal immigration dealt with." Absolutely right, of course you do. But the reality is that when you blur all these lines between the different categories, when you mix up the difference between an asylum seeker and somebody who's here illegally, when you mix up, a British
failed asylum seekers are here illegally.
I can give you a great example of where the Home Office is failing on this. I've got somebody who wants to be deported from this country at the moment in my own area, who should have been deported, and the Home Office have messed up and haven't deported them. And yet they've deported a British citizen from my constituency to somewhere else. That's the sort of mess that we're in at the moment.
You'll never find a day of the week when I'll be defending the Home Office and their competence. Never, ever, Stephen. Under any. But the reality is that absolutely, the government needs to be criticised for what its failures in, and it's quite clear that Amber Rudd felt that she had to go. I think personally, the permanent secretary should go. I think we're at that level of incompetence. But fundamentally, what is the alternative? Because what do you want? A happy, welcoming environment for illegal immigrants?
No, of course not. Let me give you the real reason why this has all happened. The reality is that if you have a bad policy, some artificial targets, you then cut the very department that's actually supposed to be making those decisions. You stop the rights to appeal, you stop the discretion, you stop the legal aid, you stop all the support. You basically end up making a whole series of bad decisions instead of actually dealing with people who shouldn't be here, and instead, going after people who should be. I'll give you an example. There's a gentleman who lives in the area next door to my constituency. He was born on a British military base in Germany, about my age. To parents, like many people, were stationed in Germany, was suddenly having huge issues trying to prove that he was a British citizen because of the ridiculous requirements they brought in. Now, what an absurdity! I had a young person from my constituency who was able to take out a second passport, even though he shouldn't have been able to, and his family were under a terror watch list, to go to fight for ISIS in Syria. And yet at the same time, we're telling people from Windrush generation that they're not British citizens. We're telling, families of British military personnel that they can't demonstrate that they're British citizens. What an absurd situation.
Yep.
Now, that comes when you set artificial targets, you cut the very department, and then you remove all the rights to the discretion and common sense.
I absolutely accept that the cuts affect it. I think we have a computer says no idiocy in the Home Office. Genuinely, I think seriously, I think heads should roll from top to bottom in the Home Office. But the idea that you shouldn't have targets because some people are incompetent and incapable of doing their job properly, I think it's absurd.
Look at the health service, right? If you set up, any sort of number of targets, but actually, if you don't provide the funding and you don't provide the correct systems in place to actually, make sure that people get the right operations and so on, you often actually end up with some really skewed outcomes. And the fact is they've drawn the net so wide, they've actually ended up pulling in a load of people who are either British or have the full legal right to be here.
Yeah, abject incompetence. You and I will agree on this one.